what I'm most proud of at being part of Leica is that we're telling stories that are a little bit different. What excites me about film is that you have the opportunity to tell any kind of story, particularly in animation where there are no boundaries. And I think what we do here is that we tell our own stories. We have a unique perspective. We make movies that maybe other people wouldn't make. And I find that very exciting because there really is no limit to the kind of stories that we can tell here. Essentially, we're kind of like making live action movies in miniature. So we have sets, we have cameras and lights, we have all the things that go into a huge Hollywood movie, but we have them in miniature. And I think walking around Leica is a magical experience. You feel like you're walking around Santa's grotto, Santa's workshop. There's so many industrious people, talented artists who are working behind the scenes, making props, sets, puppets, costumes. It's such an eclectic bunch of talented people that you don't often get to see doing these things. I love animation in all its forms, every type of animation. And I think there is a place for it all. There is a place for the kind of crazy Tex Avery, Warner Brothers inspired stuff, and there's a place for the musicals, and there's a place for the fairy tales, and there's a place for everything. I love it all. I would happily drink it all in. I think what's great is that we have our own voice. We're not necessarily chasing the last big success in animation. We are telling stories that are unique. And sometimes they're challenging stories, but I think that was always what excited me most about animation when I was younger. It was the stories that maybe pushed the boundaries a little or challenged you to think. And that's always been a rich tradition of folklore and fairy tale. You're telling stories to kids, to families, and you're asking them to think a little bit about where they fit into the world. I don't think there's been any place that I've worked at quite this long before. You know, I've been at Leica for 13 years, so you get to know these people who work here really well. You almost get a shorthand in working with them, and you get to know them as people. And I think, you know, we've been in the trenches together on many movies now, and it's a play. They're comrades, you know, comrades in arms. They're colleagues and friends, and I think there is something special that comes out of that kind of relationship, that kind of dynamic. When we first started on Coraline, this kind of movie wasn't being made that much. I mean, it's still not compared to like CG movies, although it has had something of a resurgence. But I think when they were crewing up for Coraline, they were really reaching out all over the world for people who were the best at the various jobs that go into making a stop motion movie, and bringing that talent pool together. You know, that I think that was instrumental to the quality of the movies that we ended up making, because you bring all these innovators together and they're going to continue to innovate, and you know, bounce ideas off each other. Missing Link is about Bigfoot, America's legendary beast, and he is lonely and he wants to track down his long-lost relatives, the Yetis, who live in the Himalayas, of course. So he enlists the help of a world-renowned but not entirely successful explorer called Sir Lionel Frost. And Sir Lionel is quite keen on making a name for himself, so he eagerly accepts the challenge, and they go on a quest to locate the mythical Shangri-La. The stuff that I really like is when you have characters communicating and the comedy that comes out of a dynamic relationship. And I think what I was aiming for with Link and Sir Lionel was kind of like an odd couple, um, that kind of planes, trains, and automobiles dynamic. And I often think of Link as kind of like John Candy as an ape, you know. But it was also that double act, you know. It was the Sherlock Holmes and his very hairy Watson. And I think finding just the humor that comes out of character rather than gags is the stuff that I really like, because it makes you chuckle, but it also makes you identify with the characters. It makes you like them a little bit more. We spend a lot of time thinking about casting and what goes into a voice and what goes into a character. And there was a certain otherworldliness, I think, to Zach, and a vulnerability as well that comes across in his comedy, and insecurity. Um, and that seemed perfect for this creature that had no experience of civilization. He'd never been out in the big, broad world. He'd read about it, but that's not the same as experiencing it. And I think what he brought to it wasn't just the comedy, it was that sense of vulnerability. You do warm to him because you want to comfort him. You want to reach in and give him a big hug because he's a nice guy and he's struggling so hard.